This video is sponsored by CuriosityStream. Look at this nice raised cycle track, giving cyclists separation from busy traffic. And look at this beautiful path with stunning views, again away from car traffic. And this path here connecting downtown to a university campus. And this downtown protected bike lane. And this bridge. And bike signals. And even a Dutch-style intersection. These are views from one of the best cities in the United States to be a cyclist. The organization People for Bikes ranked 1,100 US cities for overall bikeability, and San Luis Obispo, where I am, is ranked number 12. That puts it at the top 1% of all cities in the US. It also earned a gold designation from the League of American Bicyclists. I've lived in lots of great cycling cities like Eugene, Oregon, and Portland, Oregon. San Luis Obispo is absolutely in that category. If you're wondering which city is the absolute worst for cycling, here are the bottom 5. You can see Gary, the most miserable city in America, right where you'd expect it in the basement. Hammond is actually where my wife grew up and is right next to Gary, both in the rankings and geographically. It is indeed a pretty terrible region for bicycling. So we're here at the pinnacle of US bike cities, the creme de la creme. The infrastructure here is great, and what might even be better is the city's commitment to continue building more great infrastructure so they can provide safe and comfortable rides for everyone. So this is a great place to be. But is it Europe good? Is it, dare I say, Dutch good? I'm gonna spoil for you right now. The answer is no, not really, let's be real. I'm just gonna put up a clip of Amsterdam and it will be completely obvious. But a more interesting question is, how big is the gap between US cities and the best cities in the world, here now in 2022? And are the best US cities actually closing the gap? And one last question. What can cities like Gary and Hammond, Indiana learn from San Luis Obispo that they can't learn from a place like Amsterdam? We'll answer all of these questions after the bike bell. If we're going to compare the best US cities for cycling with the best cities in the world for cycling, we have to define what it means to be the best. Here's what I consider to be the bar for the highest quality bike infrastructure projects. The project makes cyclists more safe. The project treats cycling as important as cars, and ideally more important than cars. The project is part of a larger cycling network, not an isolated bike lane. The project is meant for all users, not just the strong and fearless types. These criteria don't just come from nowhere, but are lessons given to us from the best cities in the world. Cities in Europe, particularly the Netherlands, are leading the world in innovative bicycle infrastructure. And that infrastructure isn't just for the sake of building something cool, but it's about achieving goals set by the local governments and the broader community. One key goal is safety. Their sustainable safety approach aims to eliminate road traffic deaths, and they actually do something to make it a reality, like redesigning an intersection after a crash to ensure it doesn't happen again. They also believe that vulnerable road users should be protected, which usually means things like separated bicycle paths or very low speed limits in residential areas. Community priorities lead to policies which lead to infrastructure. If you're interested in the Dutch approach to things, there's a little-known niche YouTuber I have to recommend to you. All of this is to say that by comparing infrastructure, we're also comparing a community's priorities. If a community values cyclists and believes in protecting vulnerable road users, they will build streets differently than the status quo here in the US. The city of San Luis Obispo largely agrees with this perspective, and they themselves believe the top priority to achieving the community's goals is to build better infrastructure. So let's take a look at some bike infrastructure here in San Luis Obispo and see how it stacks up to Dutch cities, and if it can check off those criteria. Let's start with this really cool raised cycle track. This is the kind of project that should be built along every arterial street in the US. Prior to the cycle track, there were 2 narrow bike lanes with a small painted buffer. This would be considered revolutionary for some cities at the bottom of the list, but by today's standards, and certainly European standards, this was no good. The city actually extended the curb out to the edge of the buffer and even extended the sidewalk along the opposite edge to create some real separation. This was an expensive project that required rerouting some utilities and completely rebuilding the sidewalk. But the result is a really pleasant ride. There are a few too many driveways for my liking, but sightlines are pretty good and there are markings and signage. How does it meet our rubric? It's okay, but it doesn't really de-emphasize cars. I will say that I appreciate that the city didn't get rid of the bike lane on the other side of the street, and people still use that one too. In one area, there are even 2 bike lanes, sidewalks, and this path. Connectivity is great, and it leads us to our next project. This is a shared use path that runs by the locally famous Madonna Inn and connects one side of town to downtown. The views are great, and you can usually say hi to a cow or horse along the way. The connection under the highway to downtown leaves something to be desired, but at least it's there. This project score is great and exemplifies a worldwide trend of using paths as bicycle highways to connect different areas of town or to different towns entirely. While we're headed in that direction, let's look at the bicycle infrastructure downtown. It currently changes by the day as the city is completing new bike infrastructure. The biggest change is the addition of parking protected bicycle lanes. They're protected by more than just parking and include these little curbs with planters as well. They're not going to stop a runaway vehicle, but they do a good job keeping cars out of the bike lane and create a protected door zone to avoid those kind of collisions. The city can also install them in a day or so too. They offer much more protection than paint without a lot of work. Are they as good as a proper cycle track like the ones found in Europe? No, not really, but they're a decent impersonation a city can do without a lot of money and in a couple days. An important fact to know about San Luis Obispo is that it's a college town. In fact, you can get a bachelor's or master's in city planning and get classes taught by me. If you like the videos, you'll probably like me in class. Just saying. But anyway, the connection between campus and downtown is critical, as they're two important destinations. The primary connection is this path, a really pleasant ride that includes a bicycle signal near campus. Again, the city didn't remove the on-street bicycle lanes, but added the path. I like that we have options. This path was made even better recently by a new bridge over railroad tracks, which makes the connection to campus more direct and safer. While cars were not slowed down on this stretch of street, its level of investment and pleasant ride makes this a Dutch-worthy project. But what about San Luis Obispo's overall network? Does it hold up to a place like Amsterdam or Utrecht? Not really, though I will say that you can get to most major destinations on a fairly comfortable route from most places in town. Just about every street you would expect to have a bike lane has one, and you're never too far from something better than a plain bike lane. San Luis Obispo has a fairly aggressive bicycle plan, and some of the network's weak spots are already in line to get a much-needed upgrade. This is a key component of all cities within the top 1% I'm familiar with. They don't want to stop improving. There's even a sense of one-upsmanship. I remember living in Portland when Minneapolis was getting pressed for being a great bicycle city. Planners and bike-loving Portlanders were almost embarrassed and wanted to overtake Minneapolis. Now, cities in Europe are not standing still and continue to perfect their bicycle networks. But the best bike cities in the US aren't standing still either and probably have a greater number of big projects that could really help them close the gap. It's important to note that European cities have completely different land use patterns, and US cities may never have those dense networks of cycle tracks that you see over there, but plans like the one in San Luis Obispo make it seem like it's theoretically possible someday. So some of the US's best bike cities may someday achieve bike nirvana, but what about the cities at the bottom 1%? Honestly, they would benefit quite a bit more by looking at the top US cities than the top global cities when searching for inspiration. The top US cities have done it in the same context, a far harder context thanks to a couple of generations of low-density, car-oriented development. What can the lagging US cities do to propel themselves to the top of the list? One thing San Luis Obispo does well is require developers to pay for new bicycle projects as a condition of project approval. Both of these projects were funded through fees developers paid when they built something new. This path from before is an easement paid for by using fees to build our local Costco. And that first cycle track got its funding from the development of this housing project, which is still under construction. Both projects passed the rational nexus test, which means that cities can only ask for fees to pay for infrastructure projects that have a clear connection to the original development. As you can see, residents and shoppers could definitely use those projects on a regular basis. This advice is tough to follow for places like Gary, Indiana. Gary isn't growing, it's shrinking. It can't pay for the infrastructure it has, let alone build new expensive bike infrastructure. There are other sources of money, of course. The new bridge connecting downtown to campus cost $4.5 million, but $3.2 million came from California's Department of Transportation, Caltrans, not local sources. And money won't solve problems if there's not a good plan in place. Cities in the top 1% all have very detailed and ambitious active transportation plans. San Luis Obispo's plan identifies Tier 1 projects that have the highest priority. Though the plan was adopted only about 2 years ago, the city has already completed or is in the process of completing several, including a few shown in this video. Others are actively being planned and soliciting public input. The ingredients for a top 1% bike city are straightforward but not easy to accomplish. You need public support, planners and engineers who get it, a sound plan, and the resources to implement that plan. It's really the same recipe for any city, Dutch, Californian, or for Gary, Indiana. I'd also like to mention that San Luis Obispo has a certain locational privilege that makes it more likely to develop into a bicycle-friendly city. First of all, it's a college town filled with young people. Second is the weather. It's like perfect 95% of the time around here. Mild temperatures and no rain. Except of course when I'm trying to film and it's a heat wave and the wind is doing crazy things to my hair. Third, it's a wealthy community. It can pay for this infrastructure and pay people to write grant proposals. Finally, it's in California, a state that supports spending more on bicycle projects and climate action policies more generally. I hope this video has got you fired up about bikes and bike infrastructure. If you're thinking about buying an e-bike, for example, I have a great 11-minute guide to choosing your first e-bike posted over on Nebula. Signing up for Nebula is a great, super affordable way of supporting me, as well as creators like Not Just Bikes, Stuart Hicks, Wendover Productions, and Real Life Lore. We all post bonus content over there that you can't find on YouTube. I have a video on adult businesses that I couldn't post on YouTube for obvious reasons, but I can over there. Nebula is great, and it's made even better thanks to our partnership with CuriosityStream. CuriosityStream is the source for high-quality, engaging documentaries. If you're into bikes, maybe you'd like to know how they're made. The CuriosityStream series Ultimate Processes has an episode on how bikes are built, and it's really quite cool and worth a watch. We have a deal where if you sign up for CuriosityStream using the link below, you'll get Nebula for free. That's not a free trial, but free as long as you're a CuriosityStream member. And they're running a special deal where you can get the entire year for 26% off. That's less than $15 a year for CuriosityStream and Nebula. Signing up is a great way of supporting this channel as well as the dozens of other creators working to make Nebula a success. Overall, it's just a really good deal too, so go click on the link on screen and get 26% off. Thanks.